You can't have a serious conference about the future without talking about the biggest global challenges of our time, the climate crisis, the destruction of the environment, but also the still far too widespread poverty that hundreds of millions of people suffer from. The good news is that the world of technology, from science to startups to corporates, is working to find solutions. And we are very pleased to welcome 4 thought leaders to our panel in this session, as well as to meet 3 startups that are proving that impact and business can indeed be combined. You've already seen the title of the session. It's Changing the System, a collective transition to green and inclusive growth. And now let me introduce our wonderful guests to you. Please welcome Heba Aguib, the Chief Executive of the Respond Accelerator of the BMW Foundation. Heba has an international tech background. She has graduated in engineering, and she's convinced that technology can play a crucial role in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN Agenda 2030. Hi, Heba.
Hi, Wolfgang. Nice to be here.
Please welcome Chris Lindener. He's the head of Airbus Scale. That's Airbus innovation unit that brings together corporate innovation, startup engagement, and company building activities. Chris is working to combine Airbus corporate expertise with its ability to identify startups that have relevant technology for Airbus future zero emissions ambitions.
Pleasure to be here.
Yes. Please welcome also Danijel Visevic. He's the managing director and co-founder of climate tech VC World Fund. He's investing in a startup that promised the highest financial and climate returns. He previously worked for Project A, and he even worked for Angela Merkel. That's amazing, Danijel. Great to have you.
Thank you.
And last but not least, welcome Susanne Kadner from acatech. That's the National Academy of Science and Engineering, where she initiated and leads the Circular Economy Initiative Germany. Previously, Susanne was at the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, where she was head of science and deputy head of something that all of you know, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And Susanne is convinced that reaching our climate targets requires a fundamentally different way of using resources. Hi, Susanne.
Hello.
Before we jump into the discussion, guys, each of you will share with us in lightning talks what you see is necessary right now, or what you want to add to transform our system towards green and inclusive growth. And we start with you, Heba.
Thank you, Wolfgang. And I will start with a video. I hope to give you an impulse and impression on the challenges and activities you have.
Our present time is marked by instability and uncertainty. What will the world look like in 2050? How can we create a more sustainable future? How can we create tomorrow's world? Now is the time to create the future we want. The risks of inaction are clear. But where there is risk, there is opportunity. We asked entrepreneurs, investors, public policy experts, campaigners, and policymakers how they see the future of the world. The future of humane innovation, the future of resources, the future of consumption. We are ready to meet the future with visionary thinkers and startups seeking to safeguard and challenge the insecurities of now. We see the solutions. We see the opportunities. Let's share, let's shape the future we want to create.
So, in brief and reflecting on the video, I would say we know the challenges we're facing globally, and we also know that there are so many solutions that can tackle these challenges. And like you said, that technology indeed can help us solve these if the leaders behind the tech and the innovations we could use are empowered to do so. And it's key to establish green and sustainable innovations to have to strengthen entrepreneurship and innovation, take care of the business models and the business that are scalable and are sustainable, because this is key for the competitiveness to other non-so-sustainable solutions. We have to establish sustainability and diversity to be in the core of the business models and the team's thinking. And we have to be concerned about the leaders, and that responsible leadership and the right mindset to take action and actively solve those is very important. I can go deeper into those later if I don't have enough time now. But I see it as a very important to understand that sustainability is not only about green itself or the environment only. It's about the societal and social transformation. It's about our economic systems to be giving us prosperity and changing, and the mind shifts that need to happen in order to reach these goals. And that is very important to bring all stakeholders together and do new collaborations and the mind shift to happen globally and implement those things. And I believe as an engineer myself that you can solve problems if you want to. We just need to take it serious and not wait for another crisis or the third crisis. Just focus and work together to achieve that.
Thanks a lot, Heber. Now, you focus a lot on technology and also startups and entrepreneurs. You do this too, Chris, but from a different perspective, from a corporate perspective. So maybe you can share some ideas of, from a corporation perspective like Airbus.
Happy to do so, yeah. So there's one important thing that you said, that technology will help us to do this. I think that technology is the only way that could actually save us, right? I mean, we have passed a limit now where we can, by reducing stuff, can get there where we come from. So we need some kind of breakthrough technology that will make this reversible. And everybody's talking about zero emissions, but actually you need to achieve negative emissions to get there. So in a company that is so research and development rich as Airbus, as other German companies as well, they have always tried to build new products, build new offerings to serve the shareholder value, right? Now, there's one component I think that needs to come and that plays a role right now, that shareholder value is not only financially, but also in terms of impact on the environment and society, because it's not only about green, but it's a whole change that needs to come there. So while and the challenges are huge at the moment, right? If you only look at mobility and we do aircraft, it will take some time until we can fly zero emission less, right? So you need to solve the hydrogen problem, you need to solve the energy problem, so the challenges are endless here. And I think it's good that governments and corporations are now being forced to invest in those technologies, because it's the only way that we can get there. And talking about system change, I think what is actually wrong is a system of creating maximizing shareholder value. If corporates act on that, and we talked about leaders that are in a role 3-4 years, only that will not solve the problem. So there needs to be a different mechanism, maybe a customer shift, to really address that problem. So challenges are endless, but we are now in the seat to provide those technologies to make a change.
Thanks, Chris. Now, Danijel, you could share the perspective of a brand new VC fund with us.
Yeah, I will, and I'm looking forward so much to our discussion, because I heard so much I agree with and some things I disagree.
That's great.
Pretty much, but we'll come to this later. Yes, so as you said already, we created the World Fund, and I'm pretty much wondering why we are the first to create a climate tech VC in this size, because we are all aware of the climate crisis. We are rich in Europe. We have the money. We have the knowledge. We have the R&D, but we don't put the money there where it's really needed to generate superior returns, plus save humankind. So I prepared some slides, and I hope that you can see them. So basically, it's 4 minutes. We'll be quick. Basically, I'm afraid that we, as Europe, could miss our biggest investment opportunity in history, and I'll explain you why. So as said, we in Europe are super strong in investing into climate tech R&D. So this 33 billion euros here come out of the Horizon 2020 program from the European Union, and will be invested or are invested between 2021 and 2027. So, and this is happening again. So already in the past, we invested kind of this amount out of European budget, plus all the national budgets we have, like 27, until recently we even had 28 EU countries. So it's billions we put into climate tech R&D. And no wonder we have 28% of all climate tech patents. Those applications come from Europe. 1/3 of all leading research institutions are European. And I put consciously the picture in the background from BioNTech behind, and we'll be talking with the BioNTech founders. And we in Germany talk about BioNTech when we talk about the vaccine that saved so many lives. But outside of Germany, it's known as the Pfizer vaccine. And it's so describing the situation we have. Like, we have the brain, we build the technology, others earn the money with it. So I'm a bit angry, to be honest, that only 5% of European venture capital goes into climate tech. And if we look internationally, between 2013 and 2019, it's a study conducted by PricewaterhouseCoopers, $29 billion were invested into climate tech startups in North America, 20 billion in China, and 7 billion in Europe. And there's another number, what I don't have on the slides. Only in Germany, the need for venture capital in climate tech is 22.7 billion euros. It's a study conducted by the Deutsche Energieagentur, what is part of the German Ministry of Economics, of Economy. So it's not a think tank or something pro-climate tech venture capital. It's the state that says we have a huge gap. I mean, a huge gap. And I wouldn't bother if it would be like about some people miss the opportunity to earn a lot of money. It's about humankind. So what's the reason for this gap? Has also to do with the clean tech 1.0 era. So there have been invested $25 billion between 2006 and 2011 into clean tech companies. Those clean tech companies were only worth $2 billion in 2011. And so the narrative and storytelling is strong. The narrative appeared that clean tech 1.0 is super unsuccessful, that it's a failure. And we're speaking about companies we now, today know, were huge or are huge successes. Among them, Beyond Meat, Impossible Foods, QuantumScape, and Tesla. This slide is outdated because it's already a month old. Those companies, I say, are $750 billion worth, so a multiple of 30, but it's already more than $1 trillion. So Clean Tech 1.0 is a huge success, it's not a failure. And we can also show that the most recent development in terms of startups is also very much in favor of clean tech or climate tech startups. So this is a study conducted by Cambridge Associates, and we can see that clean tech or climate tech startups since 2014 are returning, have a higher IRR, so financially they are more successful than any other startup out there. So we shouldn't only talk about the first continent on the world to become climate neutral. We should also put the money where our mouth is.
Thanks, Daniel, for this statement, this plaidoyer. That was great. Susanne, now you not only focus on the climate crisis, you focus on like the transformation of the whole economic system that we have. So we are more than excited to hear your talk in a minute. We will have your presentation ready, and there it is. Please, Susanne, please go for it.
Yeah, so I'm going to take the step back again, why we need this transformation, why we need this transition, and I want to start with these numbers on the slide. They are being cited over and over again, and yeah, some of you might know them, some not, so I'm putting them back here again. It's from the International Resource Panel. Basically, it says 50% of our global greenhouse gas emissions and 90% of the biodiversity loss and the water stress are related to the way we consume our resources, to the production and consumption. So this means all of the environmental problems that we face today really go back to this resource use and resource consumption issue. And that's really surprising, because then when you look at the way that we handle resources, it's really careless in the way. We know the big plastic garbages, the plastic package in the ocean. And this is just some numbers that we have on the slide here. And to pick out 5% of the average raw material value is restored after the first use. So when we go to the plastic sector or packaging sector, this means that we lose 70 to 105 billion euros per year. It's an amazing number. And now we look at a sector, for example, the mobility sector, which is just on the cusp of going this transformation towards more sustainability, more, well, towards climate neutrality. And of course, here again, traction batteries in electric cars, they're associated with a huge resource demand, and it's expected that up to 2025, this demand could double for cobalt, for example. And so we have to ask ourselves, okay, if we really want to do it right this time, let's not just think about climate neutrality, which is really urgent, but let's think about the resource implications that are associated with it. So we think that the circular economy can be a huge way forward here, because it allows to combine these different perspectives. And this is just sort of like briefly showing what we mean when we talk about a circular economy. It's these different R strategies. So it's repairing, reusing, remanufacturing. So first of all, this means extending the life cycle of products. And then it's really right at the end that we look at recycling. And that's why in German we also talk about the circular economy and not Kreislaufwirtschaft, because we want to make sure that we have this more systemic understanding of how we deal with our resources and with the products. And as we change how we use these products and resources, we need to think about new business models as well. And here it's really important that we move away from this current understanding of I have a product and I'm going to sell it and maybe I'm going to provide a repair service with it. This has to change. So use-orientated, or the best would be if we go towards performance-orientated services. Yeah, you sell the performance of your product. So, for example, you have a machine that does laser cutting, right? You have this machine at the side of your customer. You have a constant monitoring of this machine. You get all the data, what it does, how efficient it works, if there's a component going faulty, so you can send a repair team. So you have not only a much stronger bonding with your customer, because you know exactly what your machine is doing, but you have a really high incentive to make this machine as long-lasting and as robust as possible. And that's why the perspective changes completely. Because if this machine goes faulty, you pay for the downtime. And that's really the change that we need. And as we, if we think about, we have these different circular strategies, we have these different service levels, then we could really be thinking about how we move from this sort of linear way of in a value chain towards these more circular value creation networks. And what's interesting is that you will have both new actors in the game there. So, for example, we call it here the repair gap provider. So if your producer, for example, doesn't offer repair services, why don't you do it? Why don't you come in and offer this? But for established actors, you have new roles as well. So as a raw material supplier, you can enter the recycling business. And in the future, you provide not only primary raw materials, but secondary raw materials as well. And you know what the quality is because you've produced them yourself. And that's a huge benefit as well. So this transformation, of course, is not going to come by itself. It's a huge change that needs to take place. Economic incentives are important, regulatory instruments, which also can act as innovation, create a demand pool. We need more transparency in these value networks, and standardization, of course, plays a huge role because it creates the trust between the different players, because I know what kind of quality I get, for example, when I buy a refurbished product or recycled material. So, we think the future needs to be circular. On Earth, we have a closed system. What concerns with material and matter, it's all that there is. And so if we want to comply with our current resource consumption, we'd need 1.7 Earths, and we don't have that.
Well, that's very unfortunate. Thanks, Susanne, for this insight. I want to pick up some things that you said. Maybe we start with the numbers that you gave us, Danijel, the 750 billion that clean tech startups are worth. Now, behind this number, there's a kind of a definition, what makes a clean tech startup. And I always wonder, how can we actually ensure that the startups that you invest in, that you are scaling, that you're supporting, are really reducing carbon emissions or really not just doing less damage, but really doing good. And because there is also a lot of greenwashing out there. So how can we make sure that this is actually working and not just high numbers? Because even if you look closer at Tesla, you might find some things that are not really, a climate tech thing. Yeah.
So we, as the World Fund, invest only in those technologies and startups that are able to, that have the potential to save at least 100 megatons of CO2 or other greenhouse gas emissions per year. So this is a threshold where only 10 to 15% of all the climate tech startups out there that consider themselves to be climate tech startups are able to reach. So unluckily there's so much greenwashing out there. And we did a simple thought. What do we need to do to tackle climate crisis? And there's only basically one thing we can do. We have to reduce the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And now we as capitalists, of course, understand everything that will help us to reduce the concentration will be very valuable in the next decade. So this is basically the investment opportunity we grab. And we hope with, or basically the founders, not we, will be those who will help to save humankind, but the founders with those incredible technologies that are creating those companies.
How do you make sure that those startups are actually doing good?
It's a difficult question. I like also, Susanne, how you said it's a complex one. And you might solve a problem somewhere and then you start producing a second one here and there. And we try also to put the systemic transformation thinking behind the selection process. So as I mentioned, we said, okay, it has to be high-tech competitive technology that is competitive with existing solutions and is impact-driven. And we look into the scalability and how far it could get the solution to people and reachability. As we all know that the climate question is a global question and not going to be solved on one continent or two. And we also look at the impact and sustainability criteria really. Like there are different frameworks and matrices like the IMP, Impact Measurement Project. We all know the ESG criteria, we know what investors are looking into, but we also know that there are much more dimensions to be added for an impact-driven technology or solution. So looking at that, we're trying to find startups that are comprehensively looking at a challenge and trying to come from the challenge to the solution. Like, as you mentioned, it's not like just developing a product for the sake of the products and then optimizing it, but coming from a global challenge, like you see a couple of examples today, the 3 examples today, and come from the challenge and trying to find the solution tailored. like in engineering language, you would talk about the boundary conditions and the framework. And before, the boundary conditions were very small and limited to where the product is being developed. And now you look into the global boundary conditions and the framework and pick up a pathway that considers all the criteria of success. There's a lot we have in the impact investing report or the Tech for Good report where we're trying to communicate our findings, because I think the definition of if they're clean tech or not, etc., we're still in the progress globally on trying to identify the right criteria. So we are trying to communicate whatever we find out with the investors and with the entrepreneurs. And as I mentioned before, it's key to pick the right leaders behind the startups. So you might have a great technology, but you don't understand your role and your implication and your the power of the impact you can have as a startup, as an entrepreneur, and how much you can change if you know the role of the investors, of the politics, all the players in this role, and that you understand the bigger picture and be actively within that, not just for exit or for unicorn targets or whatever. There are more dimensions to success, and this needs to be in the intention of the entrepreneur who starts his startup.
Now you are both in the convenient position, let's say, to focus on startups that can just start from scratch. You know, that can start with new business models, that can start with new technology. Now we have a mature unicorn here on stage, a company like Airbus, which some would consider now more as part of the problem as the solution. Now, how can you transform such a huge organization that has a running business with new technologies and startups, like at the same time, because you have to do this, and at the same time, you know, you have your existing business. How does that work? Does that even work?
Yeah, no, many thanks for this question, and I think in this circle I'm the anti-hero here. Yeah, I mean, established corporations today, they have a running business. It's profitable. Customers buy our products out of different reasons. But I think if you really want to focus on purpose-driven business or impact or changing something, everybody that works in big corporations that do the products we do or cars is in the wrong industry. Right, because these are big corporations that have done these products for years, and it's declining businesses, right? And I think those companies that will change or save us, as we said here, this is going to be the upcoming founders building those great companies. The big corporates of today, I think it's cycles, right? They come and they will also disappear. Kodak, Nokia are the good examples there to draw into that. But the changing ones are the ones that will come hopefully out of this generation here. Now, it's also for my personal journey. I mean, when I started, I believed we can really create businesses that have a high financial impact. Right, so also my perspective then changed on this. Then I thought, like, why don't you change the system from inside? Honestly, you can't. Right? I mean, these are companies that survived so many years, and they will still be around. But what you can do if you have that perception and if you come out of denial, is that they have one asset or the various assets which are very interesting. It's brand, it's the customer access, and it's lots of cash, right? And in R&D heavy companies such as mine, they're going to develop so much technology to hopefully put into their products, but not necessarily use, where we, and this is our little universe and our innovation unit, can take then to make an impact more, not from a financial standpoint, because we have a very humble shareholder, they don't want financial returns, but we can use it really to make a churn of this company towards impact business, right? So actually we are those that, it's like the, what do you call it, the awful son that actually has the mandate to cannibalize the business of the mother. And only if you get there and create then the future business, these companies can churn, right?
You mean that your unit Airbus scale is the awful son of and has to cannibalize your own mother?
Well, I hope we get there. Yeah, I hope we get there. Right. So I mean, we get the chance to do it now. Now we have to show that there can be a profitable business that is also impactful in any sense. That can then lay off the mother. Right. Nobody has ever done this. But it's a chance we have there, and at least the people around me, we believe in this. Right? We believe in the power of a big company, R&D heavy, technology driven, and still very cash filthy, because they need to make the change.
I would like to add something here, because I feel like we waste a lot of energy talking about the awful ones, and like as soon as we start talking about sustainable startups and sustainable innovation, you find corporates interested and the startups interested in this collaboration. So you have another common ground and a total different access to infrastructure, etc. So the talking about synthesis again and the umbrella we're here under, this needs to stop as soon as possible, and I'm sure you're experiencing it. Like, those are the startups, the young entrepreneurs are doing whatever. These are the big corporates, and everyone is blaming on the other. And actually, when you talk with every person behind those, you find, like, can we just exchange knowledge and expand and scale up and see the opportunities in a different way?
Yeah. To add on that, I mean, that's totally correct, and that's what I was meaning. I mean, you have big corporations that have brands, that have testing facilities, that know a lot of stuff, right? I mean, we have brilliant engineers, they're amazing inventors, right? And you have upcoming startups that do not have all these capabilities and not the access to technologies. And I think one wants to have new business models and change a little bit, and the other one wants access to technology facility maybe. And that's what we also try to facilitate within Airbus scale, right? So we don't invest in them because the financial upside for the corporation would be limited, but it's about that. So really only in an ecosystem, and when we talk about aerospace, we see ESA Aerospace rising, we see Mynaric, we see all these upcoming startups, big startups now, coming over, and only if you really collaborate there and partner, and at the end also help, the whole ecosystem will grow.
Now, if you switch a bit from technology, because there has to be technological innovation, but there also has to be business model innovation. Susanne, I wanted to ask you, because you are the head of the German Circular Economy Initiative, which is also, powered by German industry. Do you see that there is a real interest in changing the whole business models towards, for example, circular models? Because for some companies, as you just mentioned, it would be a completely different case to sell, I don't know, 5,000 wash loads instead of selling a washing machine.
Absolutely. Maybe before I answer this question, I want to take a step back, because I was at the climate congress of the Association of German Industry this week, and it was really interesting to see how the narrative there has changed. They published their study 2 years ago, where it was a big discussion of how do we reach GHG emission reductions 80%? Would it become prohibitively expensive if we go to 90%? And it was really sort of like, the question was, can we do it? Is it possible? The narrative 2 days ago was totally different. It's more like the goals are set, and now it's a question of how. And I think this is why business is so interested in how can we do it. And there's a great openness. There's a great openness about the different instruments that you need, be it regulatory, standards, economic incentives. It's all in the package, and we know we need to use all of them. And then going to the particular case of circular business models, we've analyzed this in our work as well. And of course, there are great barriers inside the company's organizational barriers, because you need to convince the CEOs that you're not going to cannibalize your own business model. If you now sell refurbished or remanufactured models, maybe they don't want to have the sort of brand new ones anymore. But this is exactly what needs to take place, this sort of mindset of how can you set up a convincing business case and not understand it as being as cannibalizing your own system or your own business. And for that, of course, the right framework conditions are necessary. We are currently in a system where the external costs, so that's how economists call them, so the costs of the environmental damage that's done, it's not being accounted for. And therefore, very often, sustainable business models are not really competitive. But if we move towards a system where CO2 prices have a greater impact, where maybe harmful subsidies are being removed, and yeah, there's the idea of the acatech project that you reduce the cost on tax, the taxes on labor. So you're going to really support more labor-intensive circular business model like repair services. So if the ideas in the business change, that you have interesting approaches that are also sustainable, and at the same time we manage to change the framework conditions and make these business models competitive, then I think we can get somewhere.
Great. You already touched the issue of regulation, and we'll come to this later. But first, I promised you a couple of great startups from the Respond Accelerator, and we will now get to know the first one, which is in the business of circular economy. Now, first of all, I have to say hi from Liz, the CEO of Polyloop. She's not here today. It's a fascinating startup that has developed a bacteria that eats plastic. Not only does that sound fascinating, it is fascinating, but Liz had to cancel last minute because just not fit enough. Get well soon, Liz. We are with you. But we do have another startup who is already waiting online and joining us virtually. So we are connected to Dominik Campanella, who co-founded the startup Concular that wants to push circular solutions in a very, let's say, dirty industry. Dominik, great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the stage. How many construction sites did you actually today see? I guess a lot, because we in Germany, but all over the world, construct and deconstruct a lot. But this leads also to huge problems. And this is because the construction sector is by far the largest polluter in the world. 6% of waste and 40% of GHG emissions are coming from this sector. And what's interesting is that half of these emissions are actually due to the production of construction materials. So we produce these materials, we put them into a building, and after some years, it looks like that. We demolish, and we demolish a lot. So 850 million tons of construction waste are created every year. And interestingly, these materials can be reused, but it's not done yet. And we from Concula, we look at buildings not in the end of the lifetime, not as a waste pile. We see value, we see business opportunity in these buildings. And we see them as material banks. We actually believe that these buildings are the source for new buildings and also new products. And this is why we from Concula created the digital ecosystem for circular construction, where we make the recirculation of materials easy and profitable. And what you can do with our software is to digitize the materials in your building. For new building, it's very easy. You upload your BIM file and material passports are created. For existing buildings, you can use our AI-powered assessment tool, go through a building, and with that also create material passports, a digital inventory of your building. And then when there's a deconstruction happening, you can just tell on our platform that you want to sell these materials, and we connect this supply of materials with the demand of manufacturers, other new buildings, or also recycling companies. And the same and the best of it is actually that you can also measure that. So we developed a life cycle assessment to really give you a report for all the regulations on how much CO2 waste and resources can you save by recirculating your construction materials. Now, we are since 2 years on the market, and we are working with the largest real estate developers, manufacturers, and also project developers, and are the market leader in Europe on this topic. This is, of course, only possible with a great team. We are all experts ranging from architecture to engineering and to business development. And every day we are working on making the construction sector more circular, because together we are circular. Thank you.
Thanks, Dominik. That was very interesting. And maybe our panelists do have a follow-up questions. If not, I have one, but you go first.
Well, I would have one. I mean, first of all, many thanks for this, and it's great that we have these solutions that certainly work in our environment. Now, the question is, does this also work in, I mean, let's say, some building in the slum of Mexico, for example? Could I take pictures and also put it on a platform?
Ultimately, of course, this is also our aim, but of course, right now we are focusing on large buildings in Europe. But of course, like we are working on technology which is ultimately able to identify materials in every or in the whole built environment. Yes, and that would be of course great if in the end you can digitize every building in the world with that. Yeah.
Susanne, please.
And of course, you can already do that, but yeah, so it's also about the automatic recognition of these materials then.
Yeah, it's a question. I've heard this sentence so many times recently for some reason. Buildings is just so expensive. We are with the back against the wall. We can't afford to use any fancy stuff like secondary materials. We don't know about the quality. What do you say if somebody comes along with an argument like that?
Yes, so it's actually not more expensive. We all the materials we are selling either on price of a new material, but with the advantage that it's a CO2 low material, so you can save up to 98% of CO2 emissions on the material. And with our process and our platform, we assure with partners that the quality is there, that the recertification is there and everything. So we have a complete supply chain, which we measure and which we check on our platform in an automated way to really assure the quality and also the price. So that I think is an argument in the past because the ecosystem wasn't there, but now it's there and we bring all the actors together.
Thank you for saying that again, Dominik.
Yeah, thanks, Dominik, for sharing this insight. A great time over there in Berlin. Thanks, Dominik.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, guys, there are more questions, not from me, but from our audience. And that's why we'll switch over to Daria, who's in our control room and who has some questions from the audience for you.
Yes, we have many questions. But first of all, I have two announcements. We've been asked if it's if you need to use the VR gear, if you want to enter the VR room. No, if you have any, that's not a problem. You can just use your browser. And the second thing is, it's a shout out to our team. Some of our people in the audience wanted to say that this studio is a super duper studio. And also, big shout out and applause to our team of camera guys and the photographers. Love the stream and pictures you showed so far. I have 4 questions for you guys, if we manage that. So first question is actually a sum of many. Some were asked, look, if you really get, if you get deeper into the climate crisis, it's kind of frustrating. The media is full of drama. There's a lot of fear of technology, so it's kind of very hard to stay positive and not go all apocalyptic. What do you think one can do? What would you suggest?
Yeah, Danijel, go for it. Yeah.
So I can totally understand this question because I also digged, I would say, pretty deep into the facts of climate crisis, and this is frustrating because we are really in deep, deep trouble. And only knowing that we can't reverse global warming until 2050 is frustrating. So whatever we do, it's already kind of set in stone that until 2050, Earth will get warmer. What we do can only influence how much it will be warmer. So what's helping me each day is to talk to those founders who develop brilliant ideas, execute and build startups. So just to mention one example, because then you can really understand the enthusiasm I have every day, many, many times. Like the guys from Juicy Marbles we also had here yesterday, who have developed a steak that is made of a filet mignon, that is a plant-based steak. So it looks like meat, tastes better than meat, has the texture like meat. And when you eat it, then you understand that even people who don't care about climate crisis will put this on their grill, on their barbecue, and they will eat it. And this will help to tackle climate change. And so every day when I see brilliant ideas, this helps me, because humankind is awesome, humankind is brilliant, we are fantastic, and I'm pretty sure we will tackle it.
Now, other ways of staying optimistic, you know, amidst impending doom.
Yeah.
No, it's echoing a little bit what was already said. Yeah, humans are so innovative. They can develop such incredible things. And I personally just can't believe that we are stupid enough to destroy our own environment. And it's really that sort of like bring out the ingenuity, the innovation, and the creativity again, and start thinking in new patterns and new perspectives, and therefore help supporting this change of perspective that we need. And that really sort of keeps me going.
May I add on that? I mean, we're talking about founders with great ambitions and great technologies and everything that will come. But I mean, it's also, I mean, everybody can make a small change, right? And I think that needs to change, because everybody, if he thinks about it, it's the small things that everybody does something small already or regularly, it will be a huge change. I mean, talking about numbers and the industry where we come, we talked about it. We are back to 86% from 2019 air travel, right? So the consumer behavior has yet not changed. And we talk so much, and we go on the streets and everything, but also for ourselves, we're on the best path to destroy the world we live in. But because the sense of urgency apparently is not that big, so make a change, even if it's a small one, but make it regularly, right? Then you also feel better.
How about you try to say something?
Yeah, it's difficult to, like you brought in many aspects, and I really think it's so challenging to stay positive. I think all of us struggle sometimes, and I know myself working in sometimes very challenging environments before. Sometimes I cut the news part. Like we need to believe that we can create a future that we want to see, and it sounds too optimistic, I know, but as you all mentioned, it's like there's a lot of potential and opportunity in the change that needs to happen. And if everyone starts on his own way, being an intrapreneur or being an entrepreneur, or there are so many ways and different functions, and everyone can make a decision to try to contribute to solving a part of the problem. And it feels lonely sometimes. You need to look, like I really need to talk to people who are thinking alike sometimes, like do you have the same challenge? Do you see that there's no perspective here? Try to hold on connections that count and matter, so that you think positively and create your active own space of creativity, more than reacting to what the news selected to tell you today, to the facts that are sometimes knowledge-based, sometimes not. It's difficult and it's too much burden on our shoulders, but we need to be more active human beings, not reactive to the impulses only that are coming in. Maybe this helps, but it's very difficult, I know.
So stay away from social media on some days at least. Daria, we have another question from the audience, I'm pretty sure.
Yes, I have another good one, and it's actually a follow-up question to what Chris just said. What can normal people do to help the change? I mean, we just talked about the aviation, that's one, but what else? What do you think, like, what can everyone do to contribute to solve the climate crisis?
It's just because one of our advisors in the World Fund Advisory Board is Gregor Hagedorn, the founder of Scientists for Future. And always when I'm asked this, I answer what he answered to me when I asked him this question. He mainly said 5 things. So number 1 is try to eat less or no meat. And number 2 is, sorry Airbus, try to not to fly, or at least less. I also love flying, and I hope that we will soon come to the point that we don't have to burn fossil fuels for it. But however, for now, it's this what helps. Third is, what was it? Meals, flying, something. Let me jump to point 4 is talk about it, what you do. Talk about it. And the 5th is contact your politicians, because they have a lever. When they feel the pressure, that will change. Number 3, I'll it will come back to my mind, and I'll say it then.
I mean, while you're looking for it, there's also a very powerful tool we have, right? Which is our children. Actually, I mean, the way we behave today will probably mark the way they will behave in the future. So whatever we do today will probably have the echoes in the history. So it's on us, this generation here now that is here, to make that change. And every time you have a hard time to not to fly, to not to whatever, do something that has a harmful impact. I mean, look at the children. We are accountable for their future, and then I think it's pretty much easy to do the right things.
No, I really like these ideas and what each person, each individual can do. But there are a lot of people out there who are struggling every day, just to feed their children, so they don't have the time or the energy to reduce their carbon footprint. So apart from that, which is good, I guess we also need a system that supports a good lifestyle. I think it's depressing that you have to think about everything. Okay, could I do this? Is this harming the planet or not? Is this right to do or not? Because we are living in a system that just is not built for being net zero or anything. So what about this system change? Because sometimes I think it's kind of okay, let's the consumer do it, so we don't have to do something as corporates, as politicians, whatever. What do you say about that?
I can briefly say something, and Susanne, you'll have an expanded overview on that. There is a big role in changing the system. Like we talk about systemic change and system change and all of that, and then we're also part of the system, and everyone is trying to be the double agent for whatever. But I really think we need to be even clearer about the transformation that needs to happen in the economic systems. And I'm very happy that we're coming now to a point where we're shifting from talking about social and non-social innovation, or impact investments, or normal investments, which are only about profits. Or we're talking about, we need to understand that there is a new imperative, and that we, in the role of leadership or decision making to change, we need to be playing a very active role for those who are not privileged or have the advantage of shaping the way. Like what you're talking about, consumer behavior, etc., it has a lot of impact, and the choosing on a daily basis what's better. But it doesn't work maybe in other countries where you don't have the privilege of choice, where it took you years to transition and have built industries now which are just flourishing, coming now from Africa, and then you're saying, the world just recognized that climate is an issue. They knew it before, but now this is like where it got us. So we cannot distribute the solving loads on those who weren't very active on that. Like, I'm not freeing anyone from the responsibility, but the leaders in the positions of making and taking the action need to be aware of the community's needs, inspire others to change, inspire the consumer behavior to change and all of that, but actively taking decisions and pointing out the pain points, and not just politically discuss about things.
I have number 3. Just to add, switch your energy provider to a deep green. If you have an energy provider that is a traditional one, deep green, that has a huge impact.
Yeah. Well, the question is, let's try also to change the perspective here. Is it really a question of, am I allowed to do this? Am I allowed to do that? Is it really bad? Can we reverse this and ask ourselves, does this make me happy? Do I need this? How long is it going to make me happy? Do I need to buy this now? Do I need to throw it away and have a new one? It sounds super simple, but I think it really can reverse the logic of this sort of sufficiency debate where politicians are so afraid to go to, because if you tell people they can't have something, they're not going to like it. But if we actively ask ourselves, what do we need to be happy? Is it maybe more time? Is it maybe it's a 30-hour week instead of a 40-hour week? These discussions are really old, but I think they still have a huge relevance exactly in this context. And then sort of like, if we are a role model for other areas, for other regions in the world, do we need to be a role model for a really material-intensive lifestyle? Or can we be a role model for a good life? whatever this means. And I think we need to ask ourselves what this is a good life for me.
I think we are now in the discussion we should have. And I mean, the title is Green Growth. And basically, this is also a question, do we need growth to become green? Or is it something like you mentioned?
A kind of growth.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a super difficult discussion, I think, because also what I disagreed at the beginning is when you said technology is something, only technology will solve it. I'm a tech lover, but I know that we have to do everything. So a new lifestyle will help to understand what do I really need. We also need technology, we need disruption, transformation, but we also need to work together with nature, for example. You have so many alternatives that come from nature that are smarter than the technology. Just one example, direct air capturing. Those huge machines that suck so much energy to get some carbon out of the air. If you invest in a company that produces algae, you work with nature together, it's more efficient. I mean, I'm not even talking about trees, planting trees, what is really powerful. But algae that you can also scale, work with nature together. This has so much more power and will also have a much earlier effect.
I mean, that's what we talk about system change, right? Because it's so many things you need to change now that only by that then you're gonna get the big change. I mean, it's also education. It's what's coming. It's technology. It's consumer behavior. It's just everything. And I think most of the people are not aware of this, or say like, wow, this is like a good solution. Let's do more of this. Let's plant more trees. Let's do more direct air capturing. But I think it's a lot more. And what you were saying is amazing, because it's exactly what makes you happy as a human being, right? It's not what we know from the last 20, 30 years to maximize consumption or to have the newest stuff. It's actually other things like longevity maybe. And I know how to, don't have an answer to it, because I think it's the biggest challenge of humanity to change the behavior we have been exercising the past 150, 200 years, maximizing consumption.
Just while we were talking, something came through my brain, because we were with the startups in the Alps this year, and we have this leadership sessions over 4 days. And one important aspect is that every entrepreneur or person trying to change the world feels like he's responsible for the world. Like you might have this experience yourself that you feel, I don't know, maybe I don't have even time for myself because I have to save this planet. Those who are conscious are always running the biggest risk of burning out and everything, because they're overworking and trying to do much more. And I like your aspect with maybe the 30 hours, what do we really need? But we need to be very aware of things like the mental health of entrepreneurs or investors even, or those who are trying to change, that we are not responsible for everything. There are different approaches, and we need to define what our role could be with the approach we're taking, even the single person on the street. Because if you take rescuing the world on your shoulder, it's not going to, it's again this what leads to depression and everything. And this is the kind of pressure that's rising right now also through the media, and the pressure that we are losing it all. We need to put it into context, and there is an opportunity perspective, there is a co-creation excitement, because innovation was always about co-creation, and it's great to solve things together. And we're not having this conversation right now about like those who are in disadvantaged positions and are reacting to whatever decisions people are taking.
Add one thing, and then we'll
just
meet some of those founders
one thing, because I mean, having the pressure on single persons, yes, I agree, that is mentally ill or unhealthy. But I mean, there is a sense of urgency to do so, and I think only the biggest innovations have come out of a sense of urgency and pressure. It's like diamonds are made, right, with pressure.
Yeah. So maybe we can just pass the question on to two of the startups that are
Yes.
feeling the pressure to save the world, because we're going to meet them now. We
Very
are.
good.
But first, we learn about the technology, because we go back a bit to technology, what technology can do. But we're also touching on another word from this, the title of this panel. It's inclusive growth. That's what you were saying. We have to think not only about us in Europe, where we have mass consumption. There are areas in this world who don't have this first world problem. So let's first turn to Cassi Welling, who's connected to us virtually. She's the Chief Operating Officer from new space startup ConstellR. Cassi, we are glad to have you with us. I'll let you know as soon as we see your presentation, and then we are excited to hear what ConstellR is doing. So give us a second for making everything ready. All right. Cassi, please go for it.
Super. Can you hear me well as well? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Super. Okay, good. So water is central to all of humankind's food production. A lack of water due to droughts or to inefficient use causes massive human and economic losses every year. In fact, more than 2 billion people are affected by extreme lack of water today. And why is this? Because we cannot tell how much water is needed and how much is available. ConstellR will provide data on water need and availability with the help of fridge-sized infrared monitoring satellites for every field on the planet, every day. Compared to current satellites, our sensors can detect changes in plant health days to weeks before damage actually occurs. So this reduces crop loss at the field level, whilst also increasing certainty across the entire food supply chain. Our patented space architecture allows us to perform these measurements with the same performance as large satellites, so large public missions, but at only 3% of the cost. And that sets us apart, because all of our competitors have to choose between cost and performance. Using a scalable and sector-agnostic SaaS model initially, we have early traction via pilot projects with partners in agri-insurance, yield and water optimization, as well as disaster management. So we're tapping into a 14 billion euro commercial Earth observation data and services market. But we aim to mature this traction into partnerships that allow us to develop into the agri-fin space, servicing the 83 billion euro index insurance market. So here our service will help insurers reduce their base risk and costs, and that helps make crop insurance affordable to any farmer on the globe. As I speak, part of our team is returning from Houston, delivering our first system for launch to the International Space Station early next year. So in less than 2 years since founding, and with a host of strong technology partners, we are sending the first commercial water monitoring camera into orbit. This will be the first validation of our full commercial value chain, from recording to processing to then hopefully selling the data. The rest of our ambitious 20-strong team draws its experience from the insurance and finance sectors, from environmental governance, data science, aerospace engineering, of course. And our team has very strong scientific roots coming from Fraunhofer. It has deep startup experience, and it has already contributed to over 20 space missions, which is quite impressive for such a small and young team. We aim to provide the most comprehensive atlas of our hydrosphere, so generating substantial and sustained impact through water and carbon emission savings, as well as global yield increase. This will secure food for another 350 million people, with no more resources than are required today. ConstellR believes that, along with carbon, the current headline hitter, water will be at the centre of enabling a sustainable global food system, and our technology will accelerate the necessary transition. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Cassi, for this insight in your fascinating work. Maybe our panelists do have some questions for you.
I want to say upfront something and relate to what I said earlier. When I hear people like you talking about the tech you have developed, it's just amazing. And I hope you understand when I say it's giving hope, and humankind is brilliant. So incredible that that you will be in space next year and collect your first data. So congrats to that. Yeah, my first question would be, and that's basically the question we at the World Fund always ask, do you think that your tech is able to save CO2 emissions or other greenhouse gas emissions?
Yes, we do, and thank you for the question. Thanks also for acknowledging that we're at an exciting time at the moment. Yes, absolutely. So we have built an impact model, which is obviously quite a challenge because there are so many different elements involved in sending up satellites into space, not least obviously the consideration that sending a satellite into space and sending a constellation of satellites into space is obviously also producing carbon emissions. Where we focus our impact, let's say, is on those water savings. So obviously the generation of water and the production and the logistics of moving water from one place to another place is obviously also generating carbon and carbon emissions. So we focus very much on that, but we also believe in terms of resource savings and potential carbon monitoring activities, we can also leverage quite some significant impact in terms of understanding soil moisture and its relation to carbon and carbon sequestration in the future as well.
Thanks. Is there another question? Sure.
Well, I would have one, just pretending that I don't know ConstellR, and I truly believe, I mean, new space. This will own the next year, and so it's going to be a huge contributor to technology. So you're doing a great job, and what you're doing with ConstellR. Just maybe for the audience, I mean, sending satellites into space, this also contributes to the debris. How do you cope with after usage of the CubeSat? What happens then?
Yeah, also a really good point, and linking to the point that I said about when you send satellites up to space, of course, you're also contributing in some way to both, an unsustainable space mission, but also to emissions on Earth as well. I think what's important to consider is that, as you mentioned, the new space sector is emerging, it's developing, it's doing things that nobody thought ever possible before. There are companies now that actually provide vehicles that attach themselves to satellites, for example, and bring them down out of orbit, or they do maintenance in space. So there's a huge amount of new innovations taking place focused on this sustainable space, let's say, segment. For us, we are able to deorbit eventually, so that would be the aim. Or there is obviously the other option, which would be where you basically disintegrate into space, into small particles. So you're absolutely right that there is always an issue with debris, but we're trying to build in that deorbit model into our development. Thanks
very much, Cassi, and maybe. Chris, Susanne, working on a circular satellite would be a nice thing. Thanks, Cassi. We do have one last response startup, and I'm going to stand up to welcome our next speaker because he's here in Munich with us. He's going to pitch in front of you because we don't have so much space. Hi, nice to meet you. That's Tobias Engelmeier. He's the CEO and one of the founders of Village Data Analytics. I won't tell you anything more about it because Tobias will. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Wolfgang. Hi, everybody. I'm going to look this way and then later. I want to introduce you to Village Data Analytics. We're building the data infrastructure for 2 billion people. Now, the world that we know typically looks a little like that if you happen to be in Tokyo, but it's hyper-connected, it's super mapped, and we drown in our own data. The world where we work is quite the opposite. It looks like this. That's the reality for about 2 billion people living in remote villages in Africa and in Asia. But this world is changing. What we see now is that there are a lot of different organizations, companies, governments that want to invest there. It's the frontier for building out internet, for building out energy systems, for e-commerce and banks, for healthcare systems, for education. And the problem is that all these investors, we're looking at about annual investments of 50 to 100 billion US dollars a year. All these investors need to understand more about the market. They need to understand where people live. They need to understand how to reach them. They need to understand where marketplaces are, what infrastructure they might already have. And that information is very difficult to come by, and that slows down the process of investment into these regions. Now, since we talked about climate change today, this part of the world, of course, as you know, suffers most from climate change, has contributed least to it, but, and that's also very important, has the opportunity to leapfrog to a climate positive or a climate neutral world and provide important ecosystem services, because the way this part of the world develops will determine how our forests will be, how our biodiversity will go, etc. So it's a really, really important part of the global picture that we looked at. Now, my name is Tobias, and I'm a co-founder of Village Data Analytics, and we have built a software to solve the data problem in this part of the world. And it uses Earth observation data, in future, hopefully, Cassi's satellites as well. And we've developed algorithms in-house. And what we do is we identify from the data that we have how many houses there are, what roads go in there, whether these are connected to the electricity system, what agriculture there happens around there. We look at risks, political risks, climate change risks, and much more. And we can do that anywhere in the world, quasi-instantaneously. Then our customers, our users, take that digital twin that we've created and add their own data sources to it. This could be sensor data, it could be survey data, it could be photographs, it's drone imagery, all kinds of information. And then their teams start to work with our villages, with our digital twins, from planning and investment through construction, and then monitoring their investment. So we are integrated into their workflow, and that unlocks our business model, which is software as a service. Now, we went live in February this year, and we've analyzed over 20,000 villages already. We're now in 15 countries. We're catalyzing investments of $1.5 billion into these remote markets. We have monthly revenues and about 180 active users on the platform. Our bridgehead market was energy access. And it's really nice to see that some of the first projects that we started to identify and look at in February this year are now up and running in places like Madagascar and Congo. So from this starting point, we want to scale, and we've built this business to create impact at scale in this enormous market, in this large part of the world. And we want to do that by bringing more and more of these villages onto our platform. Currently, 800 are actively worked on through Village Data Analytics. There are 500,000 out there. We will increase the lifetime value that we provide to the customers, and we're entering new markets. We already started to do that, and our customers are pulling us into new markets, especially from mini grids to solar home systems, and then we're looking at integrating larger scale renewable energy into these grids in developing countries. Thank you so much. We're on track to build the standard software for rural investment planning in this part of the world. I think that's an absolutely crucial key piece to the future climate discussion. And yeah, thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thanks, Tobias. And I'm joining you again in front of the stage because you don't have to feel alone. Now, our panelists, do you have questions to Tobias from Village Data Analytics?
First of all, I'm excited again. So yeah. Again, technology that can really have a huge impact. Pretty much impressed. The question that I have is, I mean, what you're creating is relevant for so many potential customers, for so many potential use cases. So it can be used by insurances, by banks, by, I don't know, companies that are building, manufacturing, building buildings, so everything. What you have started with is electrification, what I'm super happy about, because I think you can really have a huge impact and also save a huge amount of emissions, because the types of energy that are used there where you are active are not regenerative. But my question is, how can you make sure that your technique will stay impactful?
That's a very good question. There are different parts of this answer. We're thinking about this a lot. So there are contractual things, etc. But the most important parts are I'd say two. One is the culture we have as a team, the reason why we do it, and the people we have around us. And we have all built this in order to solve fundamental social problems. That's where we come from. We don't come from the technology, nor from the market. And the second part of it is we need the right investors who are joining us on that journey and support that. And I believe that doing it in the way we do And looking at solving these climate problems, social development problems, that is an enormous opportunity in the future. And I want to direct us in that direction.
So you investors out there who are listening, contact this guy.
Yes.
Heba, please.
I love two questions, one quick one.
Very quick one, please.
Thank you so much for showing that the lack of data is leading to many investments not to being made, although they need to. Can you tell us, because we were asked about optimism and how we get the energy from, why you decided to do this, and what opportunities you see in bridging the gap between emerging markets and here.
So thanks, that's a really good question. I could go into a very long answer, I won't do that. Thanks. One thing that I wanted to say is that I lived in India for a long time, for 7 years, and I've built a renewable energy business in India. And that was at a time when it was all about, in my mind, deploying solar especially. And it was slow and it was dependent on politics. It was really, really difficult. And I got more and more pessimistic about our own opportunity to turn this huge ship around. Now, in the last couple of years, and also through the work we're doing now, which has enormous scalability, and so we had this conversation about what tech can contribute. I'm getting more and more optimistic, and my driver for optimism is the ability of technology and the way we can scale it. And that's how I experience it every day, and that gives me a lot of energy. And being part in programs like the Respond program, where I see I'm not the only one, but there's 9 other people who are doing fantastic things as well. So
great. Thanks, Tobias, for this great pitch.
Sure.
And now we have one final round of questions. And given the political situation in Germany with a new government just around the corner, what would be the one thing that you say that this new government should do in order to transform Germany in the right direction towards green and inclusive growth? Danijel, you already know something. I know, I see that.
But it's also quite easy. What you said, described as internalizing external costs. I'm also an economist. I love this phrasing. So basically the carbon price, it has to be at least at 500 euros until the end of this decade, at least. So that would be the fair price, not even. There are even studies conducted where the price is 3,000 euros per ton. So this would disrupt every industry and everything, and this will help us to accelerate saving humankind.
Okay, you made the price argument, so I fully support this ecological reform, ecological tax reform, bring up the price for resources, lower the price on, I mentioned it before, for example, taxes on labor. What it could do immediately, our government, it's really going the other direction, public procurement, really strengthen public procurement towards using, being able to more fundamentally request sustainable products and sustainable services, make it much easier because there's huge amounts of money that are being spent by the government. And if you can turn just this switch, there's a huge demand pull in the markets as well to support innovation. I think that's another important issue.
Yeah. Other wishes? Heba, please.
I'll choose one aspect as we don't have much time. We see in statistics and in all analysis, and we heard it today, that Germany is very highly ranked on the science and innovation part, but where the gap is isn't shifting this into being a business and economy strengthening opportunity when it comes to sustainability, when it comes to innovation and competitiveness. So what's missing there is very well known, a lot of things about funding vehicles, a lot of things about empowering scientists and entrepreneurs behind innovation to scale up, empowering investors to take more risk and all of that. So if we put this as a focus and the assets Germany has in terms of science and innovation, to put it into business model innovation, business innovation that's scalable and available to the world, we'll have done a lot.
I mean, maybe one thing that was written yesterday and revealed in the proposal, which goes into this direction, which is the direction I love, new space, right? So there is a clear commitment from this government, at least to invest into or to help startups in new space environment, right? I mean, Germany has a very rich legacy in this area, but also emerging startups, which are proficient in this one. So I was very happy to read yesterday. I only read this aerospace part of it, that new space is there written there, and there's a clear commitment towards it. And if you read a little bit about asteroid mining and stuff like that, it's amazing. And again, there we are with technology. Can save us all.
Great. Thanks for these wishes for the government. And thanks for all these great insights and thoughts. Thanks, Heba. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Danijel. Thanks, Susanne, for joining us here at the 1E9 conference.
Thank you.